Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first office hours of 2021. Happy New Year. Want to welcome our special guests of the new year. John, Scott, and Larry are going to be joining us to talk about systemic change and why it is so difficult, whether it's societal, whether it's organizational, where people are feeling overwhelmed by the problem and having difficulty solving the problem. So when we face that, where do you start?
One of the questions you might ask would be, what kind of problem is this? If I can answer that question, what kind of system approach or what kind of methodology would be the best fit for it? Not exactly a diagnosis, but it's more like a situation awareness. Well, what's really happening here? What am I confronted with? And how should I start thinking about it? My friend John Fielder, who is a professor of applied ethics, used to say, if you don't know where you're going, it does not matter what route you take. So it becomes very important to have a sense of what you would like to see that's actually different. Who's the you that wants it?
But it sounds like there's another recognition that our problem is part of a greater system. And I think one of the challenges that we have as leaders is that we're not trained to think systemically. Matter of fact, our entire education system is all about kind of this reductiveness where we're, focused on breaking up the problem in a little part, optimize, solve your little part, and then kind of move from there. Where the system may not be the actual way we're thinking about this. How do you help somebody as they're starting to think about the problem to understand what it means to think about it as a system problem?
We really immersed ourselves in what might be called the teaching and learning of systems thinking. I remember reading a paper by Barry Richmond, who had been teaching systems thinking. He wrote a paper saying, as I reflect on my 10 years of teaching systems thinking to MBA students, I have concluded hardly anybody learned anything, which was a real epiphany for me. It was really a question of how do you learn how to think?
If we're doing the right thing and we make mistakes, then that's actually learning. Whereas if we're doing the wrong thing and we make mistakes, then it's the wrong reward incentive system. We're not learning. We're actually just getting worse.
Are we, as an organization, as large and successful and complex over a duration of time as Volkswagen? They are an automotive company who has been successful in optimizing automobiles. But the question becomes, why do we continue to optimize manufacturing an automobile when really what we might become is a mobility company? That's large systemic change. That's the kind of thinking, back to multiple comments, of mindset that needs to take place. If you continue to optimize the automobile, right now we're making automobiles larger, but we have fewer people in them. We're making them faster, but many of our roadways are even more congested than ever before. So what are we solving for?
There's a lesson we learned, I think, related to this, to what Elon Musk is doing at Tesla, which is he's all about sustainable transportation. So when they're building electric cars, you can't just build an electric car if you don't have the battery and the battery charging ecosystem around you that supports the electric cars. Look at General Motors, look at Volkswagen. GM is just building an electric car. They're not building an ecosystem because they aren't thinking about the problem systemically. And so to some degree, it kind of goes back to that mobility. Like if I'm not thinking about it in a larger context, I'm not going to be as successful as the company that actually thinks about it and understands the ecosystem that actually has to be created.
Well, that's because, policies are written in the containing system, not to help the individual parts, but to, protect them against unfair practices. So obviously you can't, it's a whole complex problem. And that's part of the trilemma as well.
Yeah.
Because each of these individual systems is sometimes at odds with the other system, and yet they interact all the time. And now they're interacting and producing a super problem, and we're all the victims of that.